Awaken your shadow. The truth sets some people free. It offends everyone else. By Seth, the Red Neo, Cherapak.
Prologue. The day the veil trembled. Every true awakening begins with exile, for only the one who has stepped outside the world can see it as it is. This exile is not from your life, but from the script you agreed to live before you ever asked who wrote it. Your shadow is not the part of you that disqualifies you from this journey. It is the part of you that was drafted into serving a destiny that was never yours. You were not called to improve the person the world conditioned you to be, but to resurrect the one it feared you would remember. This first step into truth is not a step forward, but a step inward, into the chamber where every borrowed identity is stripped away. For a soul cannot awaken without first confronting the voices that sang it to sleep. This journey will demand the sacrifice of the self built upon stories that were never yours. Beware the journey that costs you nothing, for it will demand the highest price when you dare to leave it. For the soul does not awaken when it has learned enough, but when it has suffered enough from living as someone it never was. No one becomes free by learning new truths. Freedom begins the moment you refuse to keep living as if the old lies are still real. There will always come a night when the life you've defended can no longer protect you, and the self you've avoided is the only one who knows the way forward. Seth Cherapak.
It started on a Wednesday, August 28th, 2024, a day poised between seasons, between certainties, between the man I was and the one I had not yet paid to become. I did not know then that the price would span 444 days, each one a rung on an invisible ladder descending into my interior night. I sat in the back room of Elixir Cava Boutique in Hollywood, Florida, the city of lost souls, though I didn't know how prophetic that name would become. The world outside was loud, fluorescent, and artificial, but the room where I sat was a womb of shadow and stale incense. Voices hummed from the outside like an old monastery chant. The wooden table was scarred with the hieroglyphs of 100 unknown wanderers, and somewhere between the dim lights and the dusty shelves, the veil trembled. Time behaved strangely thereafter. Hours elongated like shadows at dusk, and weeks collapsed like brittle leaves underfoot. The world developed an echo as though some ancient chorus rehearsed beneath the threshold of hearing. Faces blurred, thoughts drifted, even language began to betray me, slipping through my fingers like rain through a cracked gutter. Yet, in that bewilderment, something immutable stirred, a center untouched by the seasons, a point unblunted by despair, a gaze behind my gaze. It did not speak, yet its silence carried conviction. It did not command, yet its presence ruled over the ruins that were once my life. And slowly I came to realize that the true awakening was not the shattering of illusion, but the recognition of a self the world cannot bridle. Those early days were gentler than what would follow, gentle the way the ocean is before it drags the first unsuspecting swimmer under. There were no apparitions, no cosmic intrusions, no nights where the air itself felt predatory, only the subtle erosion of certainty, like an old stone step worn away by centuries of passing feet. I wrote a few sentences that day, and I remember thinking they were too honest, too sharp, as though I had accidentally spoken a forbidden truth aloud. I did not yet know that this book would hold my entire soul hostage as it demanded that I carve out its revelation using only the crude tools of human language. Weeks passed, then months, then nights, long nights, in which the world grew thin around the edges. Sometimes I woke in the small hours with the distinct sense that something had been standing beside the bed, something without shape, without voice, but heavy with intention. Sometimes I felt watched from behind my own eyes as though the act of perception itself had grown porous. Other times I sensed a presence above me, vast and impersonal, like a lighthouse scanning the ruins of a drowned world. There were moments when despair pressed against the inside of my ribs with such force that I could barely draw breath. Not the despair of sadness, but the despair of revelation, the terror of looking too far inward and realizing the architecture of the mind is older than bone, older than language, older than the world. I began to understand why mystics go mad. There are truths that refuse to be held by the hands of the unprepared. And yet, amid the disorientation, amid the fragmentation, amid the slow disintegration of everything I thought myself to be, a presence endured. Not hope, not faith. Something more essential, like a spark beneath the ash, refusing to extinguish. The witness, the silent perceiver behind the selves, the one who watches the man break, watches the mind unravel, watches the heart shatter, and remains untouched. I did not create this witness. I discovered him the way a diver discovers an ancient relic buried beneath the sand, by losing the surface, by surrendering breath, by descending into darkness. This witness became my only compass, though it offered no direction. It became my only anchor, though it never spoke my name. Its presence was a kind of ungoverned stillness, an inner sovereignty that could not be threatened, bribed, or persuaded. And as the months dragged on, as the nights lengthened, as my life became a study in spiritual dismemberment, I began to understand why the world fears the awakened. A human governed by fear is predictable. A human governed by shame or by guilt is malleable. A human governed by grief or by resentment is collapsible. A human governed by illusion is profitable. But a human governed by the witness, by the self that cannot be coerced, is dangerous. The world does not fear your goodness. It fears the part of you it cannot rule. There came a point, somewhere around the 30th week, when I no longer recognized my own reflection. My eyes looked older, not in the way of age, but in the way of one who has seen the machinery behind the curtain. Sleep became a negotiation. Hunger became a rumor. Time became a series of dissolving boundaries. Some nights I felt myself drifting so far from the person I had been that I wondered whether I would ever return to the shores of ordinary life. Other nights I welcomed the departure, and yet the writing continued, not because I wished to write, but because the message demanded to be born. Pages emerged like confessions from a condemned man, raw, unfiltered, suffocatingly honest. I wrote in parking lots, in empty cafes, in the corners of rooms that felt more like exile than shelter. I wrote when I was trembling. I wrote when I was numb. I wrote when I wished to stop existing altogether. The book dragged itself through me like something ancient, forcing its passage into the physical world. But nothing compared to these final nights, here, in this lonely Airbnb in St. Petersburg, Florida. A small room with plain white walls and the smell of stale humidity. A room that feels more like an exiled monastery cell than a temporary rental. I sit alone at a wooden desk, too small for any meaningful work, beside a window that looks out on nothing but a dim yard, lit by a single flickering street lamp. The air is still. The silence is absolute. And yet, I feel the entire arc of the last 444 days pressing in around me, the beginning, the unraveling, the torment, the revelation. I am finishing this book in the belly of some great spiritual labyrinth where the final treasure must be surrendered. I have become the exile of my own life, the wanderer who stepped away from the world to retrieve a truth the world does not want spoken. I have lost friendships, routines, identities, and illusions. I have died 1,000 interior deaths during this work, and each time I rose again, a little less governed, a little more awake. Tonight, as I write these words, the veil trembles once more, not with dread this time, but with recognition. The witness stands at the center, calm and unchanging, and I understand now what this prophetic mission has forged. I understand why the pressure was relentless, why the nights were merciless, why the truth demanded the destruction of everything that could not endure it. It was never the shadow that terrified me. It was the possibility that, once awakened, I would never again be able to live as I once had. And so here I sit in this anonymous space, the city of lost souls behind me, and the quiet of the exile's chamber before me, closing the final page of a book that took my soul apart piece by piece, so that what remained would not be an improved man, or a wiser man, or a healed man, but an ungovernable one. The world will try to make you forget. It will try to lull you back into complacency, into imitation, into sleep. It will offer you 1,000 distractions, 1,000 comforts, 1,000 counterfeit selves. But the witness does not sleep. The witness does not forget. And when you learn to abide in its silent gaze, you become immune to the world's hypnosis. The true danger is not in the suffering, nor in the unraveling, nor even in the death of who you once were. The true danger is in forgetting what you found in the depths. Do not forget. Do not kneel. Do not hand your sovereignty back to a world that never had the right to claim it. Come forward now, with the stillness of the witness within you. Come forward as the next one who will die and return. Come forward as one who will see the machinery behind the curtain and refuse to bow. Come forward as one whom the world will no longer bridle, seduce, or command. Come forward as the ungovernable soul. In grace and truth, Seth Cherapak, your guide into exile,